Hello, class. I was mistaken. We're not doing another problem from your text. I'm going to record this video to go over one of your mind tap problems, actually two. You know, the case problem analysis for chapter 32. It has the identification and facts section, and it also has the what if, where they change the facts a bit on you. All right, so we're going to take a look at that problem connected with chapter 32. And it's a problem that involves, again, agency formation, except in this situation, we're going to look at an agency by estoppel. Is it present or not? I'm going to switch out now so you can see the text on MindTap. Let me position this better so I can get the whole set of facts on the screen. All right, let me read for you. All right, Anderson Crossing Investments, Inc. was a family-owned property investment organization investing in undeveloped properties when prices were low and then selling them when prices went up. William Hill, property manager for Anderson Crossing, approached Courtney Branson, who owned 50 acres next to some of Anderson Crossing's land, and offered to purchase it for Anderson. Branson sold the property for $250,000. Within 1 year, Anderson Crossing sold the property to a developer for a new subdivision for $1 million. Richard Anderson, a 5% owner of Anderson Crossing Investments and an old high school acquaintance of Branson, saw her at the mall and told her of the recent sale. Furious that she had lost out on the income and convinced that Hill had misled her, Branson sued Richard Anderson for the acts of his agent, Hill. Branson argued that the facts were sufficient to create an agency by estoppel to impose liability on Richard Anderson. All right, so before we jump into all these facts, I want to just ask you to think about it. What is required for an agency by estoppel? What have we learned? One of the things we learned is that the principal, the so-called principal, needs to have made some sort of misrepresentation or failed to say something, so they ended up making an omission, all right, and that ended up misleading somebody, the third party. In this case, Courtney Branson is trying to be that innocent third party, to take advantage of this idea that she was basically cheated by her acquaintance from high school. What is his name? Anderson. What's his first name? Richard Anderson. Okay, so we're going to walk through the questions here. There are 18 questions, and just like with all the previous exercises, there are some that are factual, there are some that are legal, and then we will be asked to apply the law. All right, so number one, the land in this case was originally owned by which party, which is the subject of this action. All right, was the land owned by Courtney Branson, Anderson Crossing Investments, or William Hill? The land that's in question was originally owned by Courtney Branson. All right, number two, at the time of the sale to the mall, the land in this case was owned by which party? Is it Richard Anderson, Anderson Crossing Investments, or Courtney Branson? At the time of the sale to the mall, it was owned by Anderson Crossing. Right. Number three, William Hill worked for which of the parties? Richard Anderson, Anderson Crossing Investments, or William Hill? All right. He worked for, and it was pretty clearly stated, the company Anderson Crossing. Number four, Richard Anderson, how is he related to Anderson Crossing? He was a minority owner, right? Remember what was his share? He had a 5% stake in Anderson Crossing. Number five, in purchasing the land, Hill was or was not working on behalf of Richard Anderson as an individual. All right, so what did we say earlier? William Hill was working on behalf of Anderson Crossing, not on behalf of Richard Anderson. All right. Number six, in purchasing the land, Hill was acting as an agent for, we just said this, I just said this to you, right? Working for Anderson Crossing. So he was not working for Richard Anderson. He was working as an agent for Anderson Crossing. Number 7. Sorry. All right. Hill was or was not an actual agent for Richard Anderson. Based on the facts, he was not an actual agent for Richard Anderson. There is no indication that they ever discussed some kind of representation relationship here. All right. So number 8, Branson sued which party? She sued Richard Anderson, Anderson Crossing, or William Hill. She sued her acquaintance from high school, Richard Anderson. Going on. Number 9. Branson's theory for holding Richard Anderson personally liable for Hill's actions is that Richard Anderson created a reasonable belief that Hill was Anderson's agent in doing the activity, thus creating agency by, is it ratification, agreement, or estoppel? Her theory is there was an agency by estoppel that was created. Right, number 10. Branson believed that Hill was Richard Anderson's agent because Anderson did what? First option, told her about the sale to the mall. Second option, showed Branson the agency agreement. Or third option, had paid Hill. All right. So of the 3 options they give you, only the first one do we have some facts to support, right? Because that's all Richard Anderson has really done here. He ran into Courtney Branson at the mall and he told her about the sale. Okay. All right. Number 11. The second basis for Branson's belief that Hill was Richard Anderson's agent was it Hill told Branson that he was doing the work for Anderson? Was it Hill was paid by a company that Richard Anderson partially owned? Or is it that Hill had an agency agreement with Richard Anderson? All right. Basically, it's this first part. That's what she's hanging on to because Hill said he was working for Anderson, which, probably was just short for Anderson Crossing. All right. They're just talking and he thinks that's pretty clear if he says he's working for this company called Anderson. All right. So anyway, going on. Number 12. For the alleged type of agency to exist, meaning the agency by estoppel to exist, it does or does not matter what the assumed agent said or did to create the belief of the agency. All right. Who do we say we focus on? Whose statements and whose conduct? We focus on the principal. So for this type of agency by estoppel, all right, it really does not matter what the assumed agent said, right? What he may have gotten Courtney Branson to believe. All right, look at 13. All right, whether a court finds that an agency relationship exists depends on whether Branson's belief that an agency agreement existed was reasonable or actually correct. Okay, so for a court to find this, they've got to decide that her belief that there's an agreement was reasonable, and it was created by whom? Was it created by Richard Anderson, Anderson Crossing, or by Hill? The court has got to find that that belief is created by Richard Anderson because that's who she's trying to hold responsible. Number 14. In addition to this reliance, the third party must act to his or her benefit or detriment in reliance on the belief of the agency relationship. Well, yeah, have to act to her detriment. Number 15. It is possible or it is not possible that Branson sold the property because Hill mentioned Anderson and she believed that was Richard Anderson. Well, it certainly is possible that Branson sold because she heard that Hill was working for Anderson and that she believed Richard Anderson was the mentioned Anderson. All right. Number 16, if Branson did believe that Hill was talking about Richard Anderson, then any indication that an agency relationship between Richard Anderson and Hill existed came from whom? All right. Did it come from Richard Anderson or did it come from Hill? Any kind of hint of this agency relationship came from Hill. All right. Number 17, because Richard Anderson did or did not say or do anything prior to or after the sale of the land, the belief in the agency agreement was or was not created by him, and Branson could or could not have relied on that belief. All right, so let's try to fill in. There's 4 blanks here. So because Richard Anderson did not say or do anything prior to the sale of the land, the belief in the agency agreement was not created by him, and Branson could not have relied on that belief. All right, and then the last question on this first exercise, the identification and facts. The court, what should the court do? Should it dismiss the claim against Richard Anderson or should it not dismiss the claim against Richard Anderson? Well, there is no basis for an agency by estoppel to be found here, so the court really is going to have to dismiss the claim against Richard Anderson. All right, we're going to continue with the same set of facts. We're going to add to them a bit in the what if problem to the case problem analysis. Let me get it up here on the screen for you. And this is shorter. There's only 6 questions. But there is a substantial paragraph. All right, so let me read through this with you. All right, I think it's loaded fully. So what are the facts were different? Assume that Mr. Anderson had seen Ms. Branson at a party a few weeks before Hill approached her about buying the land. At that party, Anderson and Branson chatted briefly about her possible interest in selling the land. At that time, Mr. Anderson told her, "I have a man I will send to your place to talk about the sale. He buys land for me as investments." In reality, Hill works for Anderson Crossing Investments, Inc., and not for Richard Anderson personally. But Mr. Anderson was trying to impress Ms. Branson. So later, Hill does go to Ms. Branson and buys the property, which quadruples in value over the next few years and is sold to the mall, making a profit for Anderson Crossing. Branson sued Mr. Anderson for the actions of his agent in misleading her about the value and contract terms of the sale of the land. All right. So now, under these facts, Hill is an actual agent for Mr. Anderson, Ms. Branson, or Anderson Crossing. All right. Well, he is an actual agent for Anderson Crossing still. All right. He does work for Anderson Crossing, and it was only because Mr. Anderson at the party was just trying to impress Courtney Branson that it came out the way it did. That as if Mr. Hill worked for Mr. Anderson. All right. But actually, he is an agent for Anderson Crossing. All right. Number 2. Under these facts, Ms. Branson met with Mr. Hill, believing that he was an agent of whom? Of Mr. Anderson, Ms. Branson, or of Anderson Crossing? Believing that Mr. Hill was an agent of Mr. Anderson. Number 3. Ms. Branson's belief under these circumstances was based on the language of which party? Mr. Anderson, Ms. Branson, or Anderson Crossing Investments? Based on the language, spoken language of Mr. Anderson at the party. This speech occurred when? Prior to, before, or after the sale of the property? Before. Before the sale of the property. Number 5. Under these facts, it is likely that a court would hold that Ms. Branson's belief was reasonable or unreasonable, and that it was caused by which party? Mr. Anderson or Mr. Hill. All right. Under this set of facts, it would be reasonable for Ms. Branson to believe that Mr. Hill was Mr. Anderson's agent and that this belief was caused by Mr. Anderson based on the conversation at the party. Okay? All right, number 6. Under these facts, it is likely that a court would hold that the agency by estoppel existed and a cause of action against Mr. Anderson could or could not be sustained. Under this set of facts, it is highly possible that a court would say that a cause of action against Mr. Anderson could be sustained. Right. So 2 different outcomes because the facts are different in each scenario here. And I hope that by looking at these 2 scenarios side by side in this fashion, it just really helped to crystallize your understanding of what an agency by estoppel will look like and what facts that you should pay attention to in order to establish an agency by estoppel.